Hi everybody, my name is Neil Kuschel and I'm the CEO of Globally. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the impact of coronavirus on global e-commerce, how it's impacting trends and what brands can do to try to mitigate the impact going forward. Let me tell you a little bit about Globally. We're a tech company. We enable cross-border online retailers to be able to fully localize their proposition to their consumers around the world in order to be able to really take advantage of all the localization factors that are needed. To give you an introduction to us, we've been going for 7 years. We now have nearly 400 brands live across the world, operating the best part of $750 million of sales on behalf of those 400 brands. And what we do effectively is by building into your e-commerce platform, then we are able to give local messaging in 25 languages, pricing in 100 currencies, live dynamic calculation of duties and taxes in the checkout so that your customer has a fully localized and fully guaranteed landed cost. We take care of all of the fraud management. We have 150 different payment methods so your customer around the world can pay however they want to pay. We have a lot of carriers embedded and we know what works with carriers. So effectively, we can make sure you've got the right kind of shipping options to each market. A fully transparent returns portal is already built in. And then what we do is we use all of that information and we use the data that we see across those 400 brands in order to make sure that we give the best advice to each brand about what works in each market. And the reason that I'm here today and I can give you some information is because we get a lot of data then from all of these brands around the world of what has worked, what hasn't worked, what impacts they've seen during coronavirus, which brands have done something particularly interesting, and I can share with you some details of things like that later on. And that data is what really gives us a lot of impact here. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. So to give you a view of some of the brands we work with, you'll recognize many names here. And what you'll notice is that there are all kinds of types of brands. There's fashion, there's jewelry, there's cosmetics, there's shoes, there's sporting goods, there's football clubs, there's high-end fashion, there's fast fashion, there's high AOV, low AOV, everything. The reason that's important is because the things that I'm going to tell you work equally across all brands, all verticals. It doesn't matter what you're trying to sell because the concepts are the same. And across these brands, when we apply the Globally platform, on average, we've seen a 58% increase in the conversion rate. So let's have a little think about what was happening before coronavirus and some of the trends that we were seeing at that stage. And everybody was able to see that the existing growth in retail e-commerce was continuing to grow significantly. So this is the move from online, the move into online was already there and was growing very quickly and was forecast to grow by 16.5% this year into 2020, even without the coronavirus impact. And when we talk about and that's all e-commerce, including domestic. If we just look at the international side, the cross-border part of e-commerce, that's growing at twice the rate of domestic and is expected to have a CAGR of about 29%. Now, what you can see is in the bubbles there by country, you can see the percentage of online shoppers who are buying cross-border. And what you can see is that around the world, that people are now used to buying cross-border anyway. Even before coronavirus, these numbers were pretty significant. And leading markets being China, the US, even the UK, lots of areas where there's a big demand for cross-border. But what's important is that every customer base acts a little bit different. The German consumer acts differently from the French. The Israeli is different from the Emirati. The Australian is different from the New Zealander. Even if they're very close by, they can be very different approaches to cross-border trade. Before coronavirus, there were other factors that were affecting us as well. So, we've got working from the bottom up, lots of differences in terms of changes to tax regulations around the world, sales tax in the US, but the big two the big one, that was coming before coronavirus was Brexit. And now that, whilst this talk is about coronavirus, clearly Brexit is looming very soon on the agenda. As you look in the press at the moment as I speak, EU and the UK negotiating teams are not really looking like they're making much progress, and a hard Brexit is definitely a possibility. And so you've got these constant changes, and now coronavirus is built on top of that. So let's have a look and see what's happened with coronavirus and why that's made such big changes. So there have been quite significant implications in terms of coronavirus. More people are now shifting to online. There are a lot of people, particularly in the elder categories, the elder demographic, who are now far more comfortable buying cross-border in this coronavirus world than they were before. So a lot of the demographic that didn't used to really go online a lot has been forced to because of lockdowns around the world. Even for starting in things like food, just the ability to be ordering your food online has made people get used to saying, well, if I can order food online, I can order clothes, I can order goods, I can order whatever I'm looking for. So the speed of which consumers were moving across to an online experience, and particularly an online cross-border experience, has just ramped up. So there in the top left, you can see we've got a big increase in the people who are now prepared to shop online, and with a trusted brand and a good experience, are prepared to trust online cross-border as well. We saw an average market recovery of 6 to 8 weeks from initial lockdowns. We saw that as soon as lockdowns started to happen in countries, then there was an immediate drop. However, within 6 to 8 weeks of that drop, then online sales were back up above the original level, and I'm going to show you some stats in a minute. So people were starting to buy more, and there's lots of reasons behind that, which we'll cover in a minute. And the other thing is to be aware that COVID affected everywhere. I think maybe some of us in the UK and Europe were guilty in December, January last year of thinking this was going to be another SARS and a China, Asia issue, but actually now it's spread to the whole world and is continuing in various different waves to affect different countries in different ways at different times. And therefore it's not so straightforward as saying, what should I do for coronavirus now? Because what you need to do for coronavirus now in one market can be very different to what you need to do for coronavirus in a different market, where they're at a different phase of either the end of the first wave or potentially even now thinking about the beginnings or the middle of a second wave. But what is clear is that the short-term implications of coronavirus are that it's sped up the transition to online globally. And so if you as a brand want to take advantage of that to mitigate issues you might have in other channels of sales, then localization and globalization is the way forward. If we have a look at the long-term implications then, where do we go from here? I think there's still a lot of uncertainty and a lot of fear. Are we in a second wave now? Is the second wave coming? Is the second wave going to cause another lockdown? What does it mean? And I think there is still a lot of hesitancy in people wanting to go back to a store regardless of what's going on. And therefore, if they're used to seeing that now they can buy online, then I think the long-term implications of that is that we've seen a significant and permanent switch towards buying cross-border. At the same time, consumers are shifting their online purchases away from the hospitality sector. Physical stores, restaurants, leisure are struggling because they can't get the footfall. In many cases, the consumer has still got the disposable income and still wants to buy things. And so that spending is being switched from one area to another. And that's only going to be a positive thing for e-commerce. And as we look at the cross-border e-commerce trading during July and August, it seems to be stable. The increases in the year-on-year increases that we've seen seem to be bedded in now. They don't seem to be going back to pre-coronavirus levels. So it almost feels like we've had 2, 3, 4 years worth of the switch to e-commerce compacted into a very tight 6-month period. So how it has impacted markets, though, is very different. And how badly markets were impacted is different, and different markets have had different ways of dealing with it. If we look at some of the data here, this is data from our brands selling into over 180 markets. So in Western Europe, we saw that February and March started to make a difference. And it wasn't the physical lockdown, it was the uncertainty around lockdown that was causing the issues. But then as soon as we got into April and May, and I think people were used to being at home, we started to see the big, strong rebound in figures and continuing into August. If we take the Gulf countries, the Middle East went nuts. A combination of the malls. The Middle East is very much dependent on shopping malls. The malls being closed, but still a high disposable income, and actually a very low impact of coronavirus in terms of infections and deaths. And so people still had money and still wanted to purchase. So they just bought from the same brands that they wanted to buy from, but they bought cross-border. And I think that's also had a long-term permanent effect. It was even stronger by the fact that it was in Ramadan, and we had, which is very much a gift-giving time too. If we take Asia, we saw they started to bounce back earlier because they went into it earlier, but we saw another impact coming through in May now as the second wave appears to be coming in. But again, that dipped and has gone back up again through June and August. And then in North America, which continues to be badly hit from coronavirus, then actually e-commerce stayed fairly stable in January to April, but now is starting to really push through. So let me show you some numbers. So overall, we've got a 21% increase in all markets compared to the same period last year, like for like, existing brands, no new brands put into that number. And in Q2, the sales in itself were 53% up, heavily driven by that Middle East Ramadan impact. But what you can see here, if we look at that graph, you can see January, February in the pre-coronavirus areas. Each color is a different geography, but you can see in general, like for like e-commerce sales from our brands to those markets, we're in the sort of 5 to 20% growth rate in the January, February period. Then you see March hit, and generally across the board, there was a drop as people started to be nervous. Then you get to April, May, and it's rebounded back quite comfortably to the level it was at pre-coronavirus. And now if you look at August, those growth rates range between 22 and 42%. And so you can see a significant increase in the year-on-year growth as we get further and further in. And I think it's permanent, because now that people have got used to buying cross-border, they're building a different kind of brand loyalty with the brands that they've always liked before and bought locally. But at the same time, they're now happy to shop around and find alternatives to the brands they looked at before. So overall, the volumes are going up. At brand level, how you react to that volume change and how localized you are is critical to how well you'll take advantage of those growth numbers. So what are the factors for optimization? So firstly, let's have a look at the key lessons. The importance of global diversification. You need to be balanced between all your markets to minimize risks. Many brands who are heavily dependent on the US, for example, for their cross-border, did not do as well as those that were heavily focused onto the Middle East. So having the ability to ship to all markets means you can ride the waves and the different timing of the waves to markets well. Secondly, global operations. Carriers and shipping has been a nightmare. We are integrated with 15 carriers, and that gives us some flexibility because we can move between them. But what it's done is it's given us very clear visibility on which carriers have done well to which markets, which carriers are struggling. And you are finding that now more than ever, having a one-size-fits-all approach is for carriage is difficult because you need to pick the right carrier to the right market. Having an international direct-to-consumer model based upon having a good online presence is really important. We've seen a lot of brands come to us where they've historically always dealt through wholesalers, partners, now having their own direct-to-consumer experience, and owning that consumer relationship is vital. And lastly, in these 4 points, making sure you keep your offering up to date and that you can adjust quickly. So at the point at which there were issues into the Middle East in terms of the volumes being so big, some carriers really struggled. The ability to be able to flip that to others the ability to really understand which markets are struggling and which markets are booming, so that you can focus your marketing spend on the ones that are growing quickly. All those kinds of things. That kind of agility is really important. So let's talk a little bit about specific actions you can take. Having updated messaging for each market is really important. If you're able to have a geolocated marketing banner for every country, preferably in their local language, that allows them to see exactly what is happening in their specific market. We're still online, we're shipping globally. Shipments might take 3 days longer, but we can still get them to you. All those kind of messages. It reassures the consumer that they can purchase, and it makes them feel valued because they know that you're talking directly to them, and preferably in their own language. Make sure that they're informed all the way through the journey of any changes that there might be going on with the shipping. Give them notifications of transit delays. Be realistic, because otherwise what you're going to do is drive hundreds of calls into your call center about where are my shipments, all those Wizmos that cost a lot of money, particularly the cross-border foreign ones. So make sure you're managing the correct carriers, and make sure you're managing the messaging about what's going on to your consumer. Have a think about your returns policy. Try to think about extending your returns policy to take care of the fact that actually both the delivery and the return will take longer. The chances are this won't cost you any money. From seeing brands expanding from a 30-day to a 90-day returns policy, actually now we're far enough in, the increase in returns is comfortably manageable. And then make sure that you're localized. Do the basics right. Make sure that you've got your right currency, because 98% of people want to buy in their own currency. Make sure duties and taxes are clear, because 70% of people will choose to prepay their duties and taxes at checkout if they're given the option. Make sure you've got the right languages. Over 20% of people will change the language in the checkout if they don't read English very well. And then make sure they've got the right payment methods, because there's nothing worse than trying to check out, particularly on a mobile device, and not being able to use the payment method that is best suited to you. So the key is deep localization, which is generic regardless of whether there is coronavirus or not. And then the point further on is to really use that localization by market, using market knowledge and data to make sure that you're nimbly changing the proposition and the experience your consumer is getting in each country as the waves of coronavirus come. And if you get it right, then there's some great case studies around about the type of conversion rates that you can get, the kind of improvements in sales you can get. And we're seeing some brands getting fantastic growth. It's a difficult time out there. It's a horrible time for retail, particularly stores. And there's a lot of people in a very difficult personal position with things that are going on. And the more that brands can take advantage of what's happening globally to make the biggest success and advantage they can get of their online experience, the more that mitigates the store challenges that you've got, and the more your business can be successful. So thank you very much for listening in this coronavirus video conference world. My name's Neil Kuschel. You've got my email address there on the page. If you've got any questions, please do look me up or on LinkedIn and get in touch, and I'll be happy to talk to you. So thank you very much. Have a great day.